Welcome to the April 7th, 2021 edition of the Urban League's Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series, brought to you by the National Urban League. Today's topic is Action to Impact, with featured guests Jill Littlejohn Bostick and Byna Elliott. Today's edition is sponsored by Hubble. I'm your host, Kenneth L. Johnson, president of the Harlem, New York-based diversity recruitment firm East Coast Executives. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. Let me introduce you to the platform. The Digital Career Success Series, DCSS, is a professional development series that helps members of our Urban League Young Professional chapters and other diverse job seekers develop new skill sets that will enhance their careers. Through digital platforms such as webinars, Facebook Live, the goal is to provide an opportunity for professional development right from one's computer. So here's an overview of how we arrived here today with Action to Impact. Executive and leadership job openings in diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, have more than doubled since June 8th, as many prominent employers announced hiring new chief diversity officers and promised a renewed focus on addressing discrimination within their organizations. The push for diversity, equity, and inclusion has seen a drastic increase in the past 5 years. While there's evidence of new energy to tackle diversity and inclusion at work, historically, DEI leaders have not been given real power, resources, or organizational support to make lasting changes in their organizations. As DEI continues to gain momentum, organizations have begun to realize its importance within the overall business strategy. Today, we are going to discuss how to create immediate action that leads to sustainable impact in the diversity and inclusion space. I'm excited today to have our guest here. Jill, Byna, welcome to the Digital Career Success Series.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ken.
So listen, if you guys don't mind, please, we'll start with you, Byna. Please introduce yourself to the DCSS audience.
Well, good afternoon, DCSS audience. I got that right. I got all the initials right.
Got it.
Really excited that you all could join us today. I'm Byna Elliott. I'm the head of Advancing Black Pathways for JP Chase, which that was a big, bold commitment that the firm made in 2019. And I have to be honest, I'm not the first person in this role. It happened when I was actually at another firm. It was led by Sekou Callan, who did an outstanding job. But at my other firm, I was really blown away with the commitment that JP Chase had around announcing and leaning in to address the racial wealth gap. And that was the first time I'd heard of a bank talk about it and center the discussion around race, and to be very intentional in addressing the issue, not for everybody, but for Black people. And that really started 2 years ago. And at the time, we focused on 3 components: advancing careers and opportunities in education for Black, both our associates and the college students coming out of school, at financial health and wealth creation, and small business growth and entrepreneurship, which we know from studies are the 3 biggest impediments to building wealth in this country. And we know that while opportunity is not equal, talent is, abundant in our community, but opportunity is not. And how do we create better opportunities? And so I couldn't be more excited about being able to take on this role now at JP Chase. And I grew up in what we would call not low income, we were just straight poor. And the idea of having a community organization like JP Chase talk about the forgotten communities like the one I grew up in, where our landscape were more vacant buildings and food deserts, and knowing that those communities are continuing today to suffer from the access to capital and opportunity and equal opportunity for jobs and growth capital for their businesses, makes a tremendous amount of difference to me. That this work isn't just work that I do professionally, but it's work that I do from my heart to try to drive and make meaningful impact around that racial wealth gap in our country and for our consumers and our employees.
Wow, outstanding. Jill, we're gonna invite you to introduce yourself to the audience and the work you do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jill Littlejohn Bostick, and I serve as the Director of Inclusion and Diversity at Hubble Incorporated, which is a $5 billion electrical manufacturing organization. We have about 19,000 employees across 10 different countries, and I am the first person to serve in this role. And so in my role, I am responsible for helping to create an inclusive culture to give our employees a sense of belonging, and also developing the strategy that allows us to push forward to accomplish things. And very much like Byna, this work is not just a job for me. It's not simply a career. It's a part of my life mission. I will give a shout out to all my Urban Leaguers. I did serve as an Urban League CEO for the Urban League of the Upstate, and I see many names that are here today. And, it's always been my mission to connect people to opportunity. And now I get the opportunity to connect people to corporate opportunities, to provide open doors, to provide the training, the resources, and the tools to level the playing field. And so I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this, but a lot of times we talk about equity and equality. And in this space around inclusion and diversity, it's important that we make sure that those employees that may be underrepresented, that may not have the same opportunities or have had the same life skills and training, that the playing field is even. And so that's what I get an opportunity to do each and every day at Hubble.
Wow, amazing. So I'm 100% positive we have the two guests in the place to talk about these type of issues. So I think you guys, this is going to be a very, very special edition of the diversity, the Career Success Series. So with that being said, I want to get into this. Let's discuss recent trends and emerging challenges within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And I want to kind of start out here, if you don't mind. Let's look at it from this standpoint. What role should employers play in creating a diverse and inclusive environment?
Trying to come off of mute. I'll take that one first, Byna. I think that, I've seen this phrase before, and I think that it is true for this question. If you are not actively including, then you are accidentally excluding. And so as employers, you have to create a diverse and inclusive environment. Here at Hubble, we lead with inclusion because we believe that it's one thing to have diversity and you check the dots, you can check the spaces, but if you don't create that environment where everyone feels like they belong and they're contributing to the strategy, then you run up against a number of roadblocks. And so we know that when you have an inclusive and diverse organization, your revenue is higher, your sales are higher, your earnings before interest are higher. Your board of directors, your investors are more pleased with the work that you're doing. And so inclusion and diversity is not just a good thing to do, it's also good for business.
And I won't repeat everything Jill's just said. Ken, she's absolutely right. But I would just go one step further around the role of an organization. Is important that it starts from the top of the house, and that organizations don't make just announcements or pronouncements, but they actually follow through with the real work and activities. And I'll use a vernacular that my kid that I love, because I have a 17-year-old and 21-year-old, and I love this. They say, you got to have receipts, Mom. And I was like, what is that, right? But that's having the proof points around when you say that you are an organization that wants to support diversity and inclusion, and then I'll layer on equity, because we know that just having good and fair policies don't always close the gap, and that we have to provide equitable solutions to create those equitable opportunities for people to advance when it doesn't appear that just status quo of everybody getting started at the same starting point will allow everybody to end up in the same place in terms of opportunities and growth in their careers. And so it's important for organizations to have that tone from the top and have buy-in and, more importantly, accountability. And so one of the things that we've seen, and hopefully a lot more corporations are getting on board with, is not just talking about and saying we have strong diversity commitments and goals, but that we have accountability, and that we're going to align that with people's performance, their bonus, their compensation, and their ability to be promoted as part of the work that we do around this diversity and inclusion activity that's so important. Setting goals, having clear metrics, understand what milestones and progress looks like, are really important components of having a strong D&I program, and one that moves the needle and has impact on your employee base.
Now, what I love the top-down methodology that you spoke about. I think that's extremely important. But you know, as you know, with our audience, many people are here and they're kind of wondering, you know, what role can they play? What role do employees and individuals play in creating a diverse and inclusive environment and kind of moving that needle forward?
Yeah, I think it actually, and I'll take this one first, is that I think it's a three-legged stool. One, it's the firm. It's the organization that you work for. Do they have the right structure, commitment, and resources dedicated to creating a diverse and inclusive environment that Jill just talked about? And then secondly, as an individual, are you willing to give the feedback, come into work every day, prepared, put in the hard work, and understand that when you get feedback, how do you come back and say, I heard the feedback and here are the things that I'm going to take around skills, being, having executive presence, that you're doing the things that you need to do to help you get along. But that sometimes for employees can feel like a treadmill. Like we're always talking to them about being prepared and what they need to do. We also have to acknowledge that third leg of the stool is managers. The people managers, the age-old adage is people come to work for who they work with and who they work for. And so our managers are just as responsible for our employees' career development as the employee is. And that we want to make sure that our managers are equipped with the tools around looking at the data around their demographics of who they hire. Does it reflect the customers? Does it reflect the communities you serve? And if not, what are you going to do to take actionable items to improve the diversity on your team and ensure that you're supporting and coaching your team, making sure that people have clear development plans, you have succession planning, and that you are supporting and creating opportunity and advocating for the talent on your team. You can't have a successful diversity program without all three. And I don't want to put it all on the individual because there are things you have to do, no doubt about it. But there are times that we feel like we're on treadmills, and we've all been there in our careers. And so we want to acknowledge that there are three components to being successful in career trajectory and opportunity in your organizations.
Yes, and the only thing that, I'll really add to that, Byna, you summed it up perfectly. And I think in order for individuals to be successful, we have to have leaders that walk the walk, not only talk the talk, because it's very hard for individuals to say, hey, I really want to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion if their leader is not walking that same walk. So it's great to have leadership at the top say, yes, I'm committed to this. Yes, I'm going to hire somebody to head up diversity, equity, inclusion. I'll even measure it. But if those same leaders are not modeling the behavior that they want their employees to model, then we'll continue to be in a cycle. So it's really important to have the accountability at the top, to have the metrics set, but also to walk it. Walking in diversity, equity, inclusion is a daily step. It is something that we all have to do daily. It is a choice. And so in order to make that choice, we have to make sure that the leaders at the top are making that choice so that those that are further down in the organization can continue to model that behavior.
Wow, you took me right into my next question, just in speaking about it. So from an executive persona standpoint, right, we have individuals that are scared about diversity, equity, and inclusion, individuals that are oblivious, individuals who are frustrated, and also those who are committed. I know you guys both touched on it, but if we can kind of drill down further, how significant is leadership buy-in in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? Like, why is the leadership commitment so important?
Yeah, leadership buy-in is not so important. It is the most important thing that you can do on this journey. If you do not have the leadership, and when I say leadership buy-in, I mean from the very top of the organization, from the CEO to the executive council to that top leadership. Not only do they have to buy into it, like I said before, they have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Here's the truth about it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you are making steps, if you are moving forward, there will come a time where it is uncomfortable. And none of us like to be uncomfortable. We all like to be comfortable, each and every one of us, right? But as a leader and as an executive leader at the top, that means sometimes hiring someone that you've hired as an expert to help guide you around the strategies that may seem a little uncomfortable. Now, you have to take into account your industry. in your market, and there are some organizations that really break those barriers. They step out and they do some really extraordinary things, but the journey is individualized. This is not a one size fits all. It's important that, once the leader takes accountability, they hire the expert, they have someone that's guiding them, they get a little bit uncomfortable, but they also analyze their risk. And so some people don't like to talk about that because they're like, if we're going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion, we just want to go all in, right? We just want to put it all on the table. Yes and no, right? You really want to make sure that you are, taking the risk and challenging, but you also want to make sure that you're being strategic around the work that you're doing because you want to still continue to run a successful company.
I couldn't agree more with what Jill just said. And the only thing I could add to it is that at the end of the day, those three personas that you just talked about, Ken, I think we've all worn them. We've all been that person we're talking about. And so it's about that self-awareness as a leader. And Jill talked about sort of modeling the way and talking the talk, walking the talk. That's really important. That's a real key part of this is that when you have biases, and we all do, how do you work through them? How do you acknowledge them? Where's your self-awareness so that you can really understand what that journey looks like and be comfortable with that journey? It's an uncomfortable journey, but being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable is really being comfortable with being uncomfortable is really part of that. So if I think about myself, like, we have millennials in our workplace now. And so how many times have we caught ourselves talking about sort of the difference between millennials and the way we came to work every day? So you have to acknowledge, hey, that's a bias I might have that I need to work through and really embrace and get proximate to that workforce, because that is the workforce of the future, and really understand sort of what will it take to make sure that they're successful in this work environment. And so all of us have been there before and have had all those personas. It's about having strong self-awareness and really going through that journey yourself. And when you've gone through that journey, you can be a much better advocate for others and help them get there too and get through it.
Wow, incredible. You're speaking about the different generations in the workforce, and at a recent National Urban League conference, that was one of the actual topics, different generations at work. So as we kind of look at overall workplace issues and understanding really the information we shared in the overview, like diversity, equity, and inclusion has really become a key component to mission statements among corporations. How do we counter pushback and opposition to some of these steps when we know that there are people in the workplace that aren't used to this type of activity and this type of programming?
Well, I think you guys have to be resilient. It's a journey. And it's not a straight line either. So those are the things that you just have to know, that some days you'll take 2 steps forward and you think you are really on the highway. You feel like, oh, this isn't going to take 5 years. This will take 2 years. And then you come in 3 months later and you look up and you haven't made much progress. And so, you have to know that this is a journey. It didn't happen overnight. It won't be fixed overnight, but progress is important. Understanding what your milestones are and what success looks like are extremely important. You have to be open to the dialogue and being able to have a discourse and a discussion with people who don't believe, who don't think this is the right thing to do, who feel like, hey, what you are getting takes away from others. And so that's just who we are. And then you got to also be data driven, because data doesn't lie. Data takes a lot of the emotion out of it. It will be much more clear around the imperative of your organization when you have the information and the data to support the actions that need to be taken. And then you want to be open to educate those who need to go on the journey with you, because those are so important. And I will tell you, change does not happen just, automatically. It's not organic. I wish it was. It is intentional and strategic. I can remember getting ready for talent discussions at my organization and really talking to my peers weeks before the talent discussion to say, these names are going to come up that are diverse talent. We want to be intentional in what we say about them. We want to be intentional around the opportunities that we want to put out there as their next opportunity. And even though it might look organic when we got in the room, it was a lot of work before the meeting, a lot of work in the meeting, a lot of follow-up and commitment after the meeting. It's not organic. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and if I can just, piggyback on that a little bit, I think, Byna started off perfectly. One thing about this journey, it is not a sprint, it is certainly a marathon. And it's going to take time. Change won't happen overnight. And I think what Byna was really discussing, and we talk about this a lot in this space, in order to move this work forward, you have to have not only mentors, but sponsors. This is where sponsorship really comes into play. And I think I want to look at it in sponsorship in a different light as well, right? So you have to have sponsorship of that talent within the organization so that you can have somebody that's having the meeting before the meeting, and then the meeting after the meeting, and then the next meeting to make sure that the other meeting happened, right? And so that's where sponsorship really takes place. But I also believe that for those of us that are leading this work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we all need sponsors. Right? We need other executives and other sponsors within the organization that are helping to carry the water when the conversations are uncomfortable, that they can continue to push that. And so going back to your original question, Ken, about, how do we help those that may be a little bit resistant? Again, Byna touched on it, education and communication. I think a lot of times that we are on this journey, it's really important to educate on what this is and what this is not. Because a lot of people will come up with their own determination of, all right, well, diversity and equity and inclusion means that somebody is taking something away from me, right? And what I like to say is there's enough for everybody, right? There is enough space. There is enough room. We are in an ocean, right? An ocean of opportunity. And that means that there is enough space and place for us all to be there and to belong. And we also need to look at a concept that we use a lot is to challenge and support. Meaning challenge those individuals who may be a little bit resistant, but also support them through their journey. Because remember, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't run an actual marathon, but I did train for it. And during that training, I had people along the journey to help me to say, all right, you can do this. There were days when there was a 5-mile run and it was great. Well, there were days when it was a 15-mile run and I felt like I cannot do this. That's it. It's over. I'm not going to make this happen. And so when you support those individuals who may be a little bit hesitant, don't shut them out. Really use it as an opportunity to educate them, to support them, and to help them along the way on the journey.
Wow, you guys have really gave a ton of points. I'm just going to kind of veer a little, but Jill, if you don't mind, just for the audience, can you define the difference or define the characteristics of a sponsor and a mentor?
Sure, no problem. A mentor is, someone that normally it can be formal or informal. You typically are meeting with that individual on a consistent basis. You are, talking to them about your goals. They're providing sometimes real-time advice and coaching you along the way. When I think about a mentor in some ways, I think of it as a professional coach, someone that's going to be with me step by step and guiding me through the process. When I think about a sponsor, this is typically someone that is higher up in the organization. They know who I am. They know what my overall goals are, but they don't necessarily hold my hand along the way. We're not meeting every month. We might not be meeting every quarter, but they are always making sure that my voice is at the table when I'm not in the room. So that's someone that is advocating for me, that is making sure that when there are talent discussions, that I am brought into the conversation. And at times, they may even say, hey, listen, here's some additional training and knowledge and things that you need to do to help you move up within the organization. So I see it as like that distant auntie, right? You don't see her every day. She doesn't call you all the time, but you know that she loves you. You know that she has your back and that she is making sure that you're okay. She's always there if you need her. And she's always, in the ear telling your parents what needs to happen versus, that auntie that stays around the corner that's there every day, coming to all the school plays, that's, always around.
I love it. So Byna, I want to go back to something you spoke about, a couple things actually. So you spoke about, having the data. You spoke about, there's always going to be challenges to change because people are often uncomfortable with change. And you spoke also about talent. So where have you experienced resistance or challenges in regards to expanding your approach to diversity and inclusion? And also, how do you respond to that, or how did your team respond to that?
So one of the things, to be really honest, I've not always been in the D&I space or an HR. I don't have an HR background. I came through the ranks through our corporate social responsibility, risk management, and on the business side. But I always had a passion for this work and was always available to others to champion, coach, mentor, sponsor, advocate, and did it just naturally and always made time for others. So if I really am honest, I've only been in the D&I or DEI space for probably 6 months to 8 months. So Jill probably has a longer, sort of examples of what you can do. But I think what has always been sort of my North Star guiding post around how I advocate and support or lean in with my voice around fairness, equity, policies, programs, things that need to be done in an organization was really to put myself in the person's shoes who's not in the room. Because I felt like that seat at the table I had, that was the voice for the voiceless and the people that were not in the room. And so that I had to be, courageous, speak truth to power, because if I didn't, who would? And why do I have this seat and why am I occupying space in this room if I'm not going to drive and lean in for change? And even though there's some times that I go, let me pray before I go to this meeting, because this might be the meeting that I actually might lose my job. Because you have to say some things to people and you have to not go along to get along. So there might be some things and proclamations that get made in the meeting. Everybody goes, great idea. And you go, I disagree. I have a different perspective. And because my lived experiences are different, and because my path to this space is different, I view the world from a different set of lenses. And so I had to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I also had to know that I'm not taking this personally. And that the work that I have to do for others, if I don't do it, who will? And if I won't take the courage and take the hits that come along with it, why do I have this space? And so that's the way I've always operated. And I get it from my grandmother who, had an 8th grade education and raised 9 kids and owned her own home and was able to make ends meet. Just that toughness, that resilience, that commitment to serving others is important to me. And when I encounter people who don't agree, I don't take offense. I try to spend time with them. I try to educate them. I try to find those common ground places where I can show them that we're more alike than not. And and sometimes we might agree to disagree, but at least I've taken the time to give them my understanding and my perspective, and that I am committed to moving the needle around progress, and that sometimes progress will run you over. And if you don't want to move along, you might miss out, but you miss talent and you miss opportunity if you don't open up your viewpoint of what talent looks like and how talent presents itself in our workplace or outside of our workplace.
Wow, amazing. You know what? I appreciate the overview and the transparency in your D&I journey, and we'll get back to that. But I definitely wanted to go to Jill and kind of ask a similar, if not the same question. Where have you experienced resistance or challenges to expanding your approach to diversity and inclusion?
I think the challenges, it comes in the work. The work itself is challenging. It is challenging work. It is hard work. I think over the course of the last year, being in this space is hard. I appreciate Byna's reference to, if I say this, am I going to lose my job? I can certainly relate because there have been times when you have to say the right thing, right? You are in the room. I feel it is my responsibility. It is my mission to be in the room and to say the things that need to be said. And that I cannot have fear in doing that, right? I am here. If I lose my job, I lose my job, right? I got this one, I'll get another one. and that's honestly how I feel. I'm in a great space and place where I have a leader that I report to. While I don't always get everything I want, I come with a lot of suggestions, right? I am throwing stuff left and right in terms of what we can do, how we can do it, what needs to be done. And while I don't always get those things, I always have a conversation around why I think it's important. And a lot of times, my boss always says, it's not no, it's just not yet, right? And so that's why it's important to have a long-term strategy to see what's going to happen. All right, like I mentioned, I've been in this role 2 years. And so there are things that I am starting to do now that was on my list on day one, literally on the list. And so it's important to make sure that, opposition is going to come. You have to go at the speed of the organization sometimes, but it's always important to not lose focus, to have the bigger picture, to have a long-term strategy. Again, going back to that analogy, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so a lot of times when I do run up against resistance, I just jot down a note. Here in my office, I have whiteboards with all types of notes and strategies and plans. And then, when those things do come to fruition, I'm like, great, let me check this off the box. Now let me begin to continue to create, because I have people within the organization, 19,100 people to be exact, who are counting on me to create this inclusive culture.
Let's stay there for a second, because I just kind of want to dig into your approach, because I think it's valuable to our audience. So when you come into an opportunity, is there a process that you use? Is it a 30, 60, 90? You spoke about mapping out a strategy from day one, right? So let's just speak about that just in general. It's an action to impact conversation. So is that an action you take to have impact moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, whether you are an individual contributor or whether you're trying to lead this work for an organization, I always think it's important to do research. Research the organization, research what's being done. If you are within a company, do you know what's happening in this DEI space? A great place to look, I always say, which is, I didn't know this until later, and Byna can probably relate. I always go to the investor report. What are we telling investors? Because what we are telling investors is, if you're a publicly traded company, is truly, what's at the top of the mind for the top of the organization. So always do your research and kind of have an understanding of what is happening with the organization. Do an analysis. Find out. For me, I try to analyze where we are. And so it was important for me when I started this role to understand what the landscape of the organization was, so that I could then begin to do exactly what you said, Ken. What am I going to accomplish? And, it's funny because I started off with a 3690 and I was like, okay, this is a much larger company. So maybe we're going to do quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, because it takes a little bit longer, right? And so, really evaluate what pace you can move in, because that's important as well. There are some, if you're in a smaller organization, you may be able to make some significant changes in 30, 60, 90 days. If you're in a larger organization, it may take a little bit more time. And so, I look at creating a plan, talking to the individuals within the organization that may be doing the work already. If you're not specifically in this DEI role, is there work that's being done? Set up a coffee chat. Most of us are virtual right now. Have a virtual coffee chat and just try to get a better understanding of what's happening and how you can fit into the role. Because here's the thing. I tell people, while I may lead inclusion and diversity at Hubble, I cannot do it by myself. I cannot, if you're expecting Jill Littlejohn Bostick to move the entire needle around everything at inclusion and diversity at Hubble, then I might as well just go home. Well, I am home, but that might as well just be the end of the conversation. So it's really important to see how you fit into the puzzle, because believe it or not, no matter where you are in the organization, there is something that you can do to continue to help move the work forward.
I love it. Thank you so very much for kind of taking a deeper dive into your thought process coming on board. So Byna, I know you spoke about recently coming into the DEI space, and Kristen provided a great statistic. She actually shared that diversity, equity, and inclusion related job openings have risen by 55% since June 8th, after falling by 60% at the onset of the coronavirus pandemic in March. So according to data from the employment and recruiting site Glassdoor, this is all just 2021 data, right? So with that being said, I know our audience, I know you guys have questions, and we're going to get to a Q&A shortly, but I'm just peeking in here, and they want to know, what advice would you give to someone just beginning in diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
As Jill said, this is hard work, and I've always had the person that led DEI work at our organization was my partner, my friend, and we stayed connected because I was passionate about the work. But I used to watch and see how challenging the work was, because if you are not aligned, so I tell people first, do your homework. Jill talked about the research and ESG reporting and connecting with those leaders that are doing the work in that organization, but really spend a lot of time understanding the organization and the culture. Because while there can be announcements and pronouncements, culture will eat strategy and other things for lunch. If the culture will not be accepting to your idea of what progress needs to look like and what you need to achieve in an organization, that's going to be your first challenge. So make sure that you spend a lot of time with that organization, with the people, the leaders that you'll be working with, understanding beyond the yes, we know we need it, to really understanding, are they committed to it from an organization perspective? And what do they think success looks like? And does their success or their idea of success look similar to your idea of success? Because if not, you'll be really challenged and have a lot of tough days and nights ahead of you, because you'll find that you have a mismatch with it. You might want to move faster, you might want to go bigger, and they might want to take slower steps, right? And so that's important to really understand it. Do you and your organization that you want to work for have an alignment around your values and what progress looks like and what success looks like? And then when you think about that, really understand that because it is that marathon that Jill talked about, and it's not just a straight path, that you have clear milestones so that you know what success looks like along the way, so that you can celebrate those smaller wins, because you will not get to the finish line in a year or 2 years or in quarter one or quarter two, but so that you have some good mile markers along the way around what you want to drive and what value you want to create and what progress you want to make for your company and the employees, because they're counting on you to move the needle and drive progress in the organization. And if you have the value alignment, if you understand what you're doing, if you got the data and you know what success looks like, I think you are off to a great opportunity in DEI. And I think it's important to know that the life of a traditional DEI person, probably before the George Floyd, probably was 24 to 36 months in a role, especially when you don't ask those 3 questions up front around alignment, values, and culture. Jill?
Yeah, I'm over here shaking my head. I'm on mute. I'm like, like everything you said is exactly correct.
No, but Jill, let me bring you in though on this side of it, right? So what advice would you give to someone, even that's looking to kind of make a pivot, right? If they're looking they're currently positioned well at an organization, but they to Byna's point, sometimes you're looking across the conference room saying, you know what, that's work I'm interested in. And if someone's looking to make a pivot, how do you suggest they go about strategizing to accomplish just that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I get that question often. And what I say is there's not a clear-cut path, honestly, because this space around diversity, equity, and inclusion is still new. It's a new space. There are some organizations and companies who have been doing it for quite some time, but a number of companies are still very new in this space. And I don't think it's going anywhere. You know, as we look at the population becoming more brown over the next decade or so, this role isn't going anywhere. But I certainly think there are some places that, you know, you can educate yourself, understand what it is and what it is not. This role is not a role where you are only representing one person or one set of people, right? This role is one where you are representing all people within the organization, but ensuring that everybody has a place where they belong, right? So, you know, some resources that, reading is fundamental. So, make sure that, you are reading books around, some great thought leaders in this space. I'm a podcast girl. So I love listening to different podcasts around diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that you have that core sense of knowledge. I'm also a big fan of the conference board. They have a lot of resources and tools to help people kind of upskill themselves in this area. But then again, ask the questions. I have a friend who created a role around diversity, equity, and inclusion simply because she asked. She was at a medium-sized organization that did not have someone in that role. She went to the leadership and said, hey, I'd like to have, what are we doing around this space? Do we have someone? And they said, great. How about we add it to your plate? Now, at that point, you have a decision to make, right? To decide, that wasn't just her sole role at the time. She still had her current role, and then she layered on top of it the DEI role. And so I think, it depends on where you are at the organization. If you're at a smaller organization and you'd like to get into this space, certainly talk to the leadership about where they are, what's happening if it doesn't exist, or even if at a medium organization, if the role does exist, how can you help to elevate the work that's being done in this space? So for me, potentially, here at my role at Hubble, I have probably 10 to 15 people that I call on at numerous times to help me with this strategy. I bounce ideas off of them. I help them, they help me really create what's happening. They help to become champions in their business units with their direct teams. And at some point when we expand these roles, I'd like to think that some of those individuals will be at the top of the list to join the team.
Excellent.
Definitely. All right. So I have a question for both of you, actually. And Jill, you kind of took me in this direction. What resources, and Byna, you know what? I know Jill just kind of touched on some of this, and I'll ask her to drill down a little deeper after I speak with you on this. What resources would you recommend for someone to check out, someone that's just beginning a diversity, equity, and inclusion role? Any literature, any trainings, courses, certifications they should seek?
So I spent a lot of time on looking at research. And so one of my go-tos is a lot of the research that McKinsey puts out on race and equity. A lot of the colleges and universities have a lot of studies around it. There's Diversity Roundtable has information. So there's a lot. The good thing is if you Google it, you will not see a shortage of resources, but McKinsey still continues to have really strong, relevant, and timely information around this body of work that I utilize, and other like I read a couple books, like the one I'm reading right now is called The Conversation, by Robert Livingston, how seeking and speaking the truth about racism can radically transform individuals and organizations. This is what I'm reading right now.
Great book, Byna. Some of my employees I don't think we can afford them, but they're like, can we get him to come in? I'm like, I'm not sure, but that's a great book.
We definitely can talk about it because we just leveraged him, and he was a great discussion with our AVP leaders, and they loved it.
Awesome. Well, I will contact you after to talk about that for sure.
Love it. Oh, okay, let's see here.
And it looks like, Byna, can you say the name of the book again? It looks like people are wanting to know the name of the book.
It's called The Conversation by Robert Livingston.
Excellent. Thank you for writing that. I'm just looking through some of the audience questions. Wow, really exciting stuff here. Everybody seems to be really ramped up that you guys are here. Are there any, coursework, anything like that you guys have engaged in or taken advantage of that's allowed you to kind of move forward from a career perspective? And not necessarily about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but just in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have not taken specific, formal education around, DEI. That didn't even exist when I was in school, although I think it does exist now. But, one of the courses that has really been helpful, which is around communication. Communications course was really important, and I've leveraged that in my role, as well as psychology. I took a psychology course that I find myself really thinking about, the psychology around this work that we're doing. And so, I would certainly advise people to look into that space. But I also want to touch back on what Byna talked about, because I completely forgot about it. But McKinsey is a fabulous resource. If you work for a company and your organization actually has a formal relationship with McKinsey, McKinsey has a number of programs right now that I just think are phenomenal. One is a program around expanding equity that's focusing on racial equity in the workplace. They also have two other great programs that specifically deal with the Black population, and one is a Black executive leadership program that focuses on those individuals that are moving into the C-suite, as well as their management accelerator program that leverages those employees that are, maybe not at the C-suite level, but just looking to advance. So McKinsey has so many, and I'm looking at my phone. I have like tons of like in my iBooks. I just kind of like read through some of their stuff. So you can almost educate yourself. I remember people used to say, I just go to Google for everything. And so if you're looking for some stuff around DEI, while there are a number of other sources, you can certainly start with the different publications that McKinsey has published to help educate yourself.
I'll just put an explanation point on what Jill said about that and the two programs she talked about, their executive program and their management accelerator program are two of their new initiatives. I will say that Jill touched on a point that I think is really important is around ESG, because that is sort of those so what. So the work that needs to be done, we all agree, is a business imperative, and it's the right thing to do from a corporation perspective and for shareholder value. But there is an accountability organization, which are, the ESG organization, ESG analytics or reporting organizations. And so I would tell people there is a number of metrics that are being evaluated when companies are being looked at from an institutional investor through their ESG analysis. And where you can get that information from is Global Reporting Initiative, and they have a certification and training. So I would tell people, so if you want to know the so what and why does it matter, besides it being the right thing to do, those other things, is that you want to understand what's expected by investors for publicly traded companies around the ESG body of work. And so I would look at GRI as one of those places. And the other place that I will look at is the Boston Center for Corporate Citizenship, Boston College Center for Corporate Citizenship. They have a good body of work and a lot of training, both online and in person when we were back in person, but now maybe it's on virtually now, that you can get a certification on corporate citizenship. They have a strong arm around corporate social responsibility, and ESG are really other good tools that you can look at from a more formal education and knowledge awareness. And I would tell you that GRI, it's pretty overwhelming. It's not a lot of eye candy on their site, but there is a lot of great nuggets and information, and the understanding of what's going to be required in the reporting and what kind of disclosures are going to be required from companies, and they will be on the cutting edge of that.
All right. So you know what? I promised people that we would get to a Q&A. I could really talk to the two of you for the next 2 hours, but I know we have a hard stop at 1. So let's get through some of these questions. Brandy would like to know, if we are part of our ERG, Employee Resource Group, how can we maximize the value of the group to promote a sense of belonging in future diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Yeah, so first I'll just say thank you, Brandy, because ERGs are critical in companies because they are sort of the culture carriers and the ambassadors of the organization. And those are great places for people to feel a sense of belonging and to have a tribe. And if you're involved and engaged in ERGs, one, thank you, because you could just come to work, put your head down and just focus on you, but that community makes a big difference. Also, we'll say that ERGs are great platforms for building your skill set and getting exposure to upper level management and leaders in the organization and to hone your leadership skills. So there's some benefits both in having that, tribe and that safe place to really be yourself, but also there's skills to be built, and you can leverage your ERG and your experiences and you hosting or developing programming through your ERG to show your leaders what additional skills you can bring to the table, even if it's not in your traditional job title. Jill?
Yeah, and I was just gonna, piggyback because we actually have EIGs, Employee Inclusion Groups, and I know some of the members are on today. And what I can say is that their leadership has been invaluable. And so don't know that you have power in that position. While you may not have the titles of someone on the executive leadership team, if you are a part of an ERG, EIG, BRG, they have a number of names, don't know that you have power to push things forward, because those groups are started so that you can help to highlight issues within the organization to create that sense of belonging, but you also have power to help drive business results. You know, it's not just one-sided. So there's a portion of it that is what I call that is for you personally, but also for you professionally in terms of helping to elevate yourself, but also to help to elevate the company. Because when you do that, then in turn, you're also elevating yourself. So, you know, don't be afraid to use those groups to highlight issues that sometimes may be a little taboo. Maybe you wouldn't talk about, you know, having a conversation on race alone, but if you present that idea from the ERG perspective, then all of a sudden the conversation is a little bit more applicable for the organization. So earlier in this conversation, we talked about kind of knowing the temperature of the organizations and where they may stand. And so leverage those ERGs to have some of those difficult conversations. One thing that our group of men has presented, multicultural men, is, you know, uncomfortable conversations. And that's exactly what it's called. And so they use that as an opportunity to talk about the things that sometimes don't get talked about.
And ours is, we have keep it 100 conversations.
All right, keep it 100. I like that. Y'all into the culture over there.
Yeah, right. Well, both of you guys are keeping it 100 today. I appreciate it. So we have a question. Speaking of keeping it 100, I think this is a great question. Maya would like to know, well, first she would like to thank you for a much needed conversation, but based on previously discussed conversations, is D&I a trend, or can we ensure its permanency?
I think it matters how committed we are to holding people accountable and how we spend our dollars and how we invest our dollars, right? I like to think that the moment we had last year around George Floyd wasn't a moment. It should be a movement, but it takes all of us to keep our eye on what we want to see happen and to ask questions and be uncomfortable if we don't see progress in our organizations and where we spend our dollars, right? So if you don't see companies that align with your values, I hope you're not spending money with them. And I hope you don't mind writing a letter to those presidents and CEOs and saying, I would buy from you and I like your product, but your stance and your progress and your disclosures don't align with my values, and we won't spend our dollars with you. And so companies will stay focused if there's accountability and there's expectations. And that comes from the inside and the outside as a consumer.
Wow, amazing. We have another question here, and it's from, I believe, Caitlin, but she wants to know what benefits result when your organization practices value and diversity. Are the benefits greater than the cost involved? You know what, real quick, Jill, I want to go to you on this because I watched your TEDx and I want to recommend that everyone watch it, but I think you touched on this in that conversation.
Okay, now you have me on the spot. I did that TEDx like 4 years ago, so I have no idea what I said. So if you watch the TEDx and this answer is different, then don't beat me up about it. But, you know, I think that there's tremendous value. I kind of touched on this earlier about just the financial value. I mean, there are statistics that show that when a company is more inclusive, more diverse, that they have higher revenue. I always tell people it's not about black and white. Most of the time it's about green. And so when people are looking at having higher revenues and higher profits, inclusive and diverse teams bring that home, right? And then when you talk about being more innovative, more creative, if you have different people, you know, at the table, Byna kind of hit on this earlier in terms of millennials and Gen Z, you know, when they're thinking about the different types of products that they need and that they want to see, if those voices aren't at the table, then you're going to miss out on a market segment that could be billions, right? And so I really think that, you know, if you cannot initially drive the case within your organization as it being a moral thing to do, it is just good for business overall. And there are tons of statistics that back that up. And that might not have been the point that you wanted me to hit on, Ken, but that's the first thing that popped in my head.
That was exceptional. That's exactly the point I wanted you to hit on. I also have another question, and it's for both panelists. So they want to know, how did you break into D&I? How did you break into the industry, and what can we do to position ourselves for a successful career within the industry?
That's a great question. And I'm the newest to the DEI space, so I'll just kind of give you my lived experience, and I'll try to make it quick and make sure that we end on time, is that I had passion for the work, but I also was leading significant work at my company, but it was not race-based. It was focused on income. So I focused on all low middle income communities. And when I finally looked at the data around the George Floyd time and said, well, why do you know you've had impact? It was not as significant as I thought it was. And so that was my you can do more moment for me. And how important is it for you to have the discussions and be much more intentional in your work to drive better outcomes for the communities you want to serve? And so I led the work at my own company and leaned in really hard around DEI after that to say, I want to do the work for poor people, but I also want to make sure that poor does not outweigh race, because there is a component of race that can be overlooked when you're just talking about poor people. And that work can not be as intentional as you like it to be. And so for me, it was me saying, I want to do more. I need to do more. I need to make sure that the 17-year-old and 21-year-old I've been raising, that I don't pass to them a world where they are at the same starting point we're at today. And so I've got to lean in and be a better example and walk the talk. So I just leaned in and really raised my hand. And when they brought a problem, I said, I'm in, I'll help, I'll solve. And really leaned into a role that I wasn't looking for, but I was looking to do the work.
Jill, I'm going to ask the same of you.
Yep, same question. Previously, I led the YWCA here, which focuses on eliminating racism and empowering women, and then went on to lead the Urban League here, which, that work and a lot of the work that I was doing, I was almost consulting with corporations around what they could do, how they can get more talent, and when I think about, I talked earlier that my mission is being a people connector and connecting people to opportunities. And so I was already doing that work from a nonprofit standpoint. And then I was able to make this shift into the corporate space. And I think that, I'm veering a little bit from the question, Kim, because I'm trying to answer one of the questions that I saw. There are different dimensions to diversity. Diversity is not just about race. The diversity includes race, gender, sexual orientation, sexual identity. It includes socioeconomic status. It includes age. It includes lived experiences. It includes different backgrounds in terms of what job function someone has, right? And so it's really important to understand what all of those different dimensions are within your organization, and how do you allow those different dimensions to work well together. We're fairly new in our journey. Only 2 years. And so we recently published some of our numbers on our website because we want it to be transparent. And that doesn't necessarily happen in the manufacturing space. So we've published the percentages there. And, in the near future, I think we'll be going to the next level to present even more data, because when there is data and there's transparency, then you're able to bring in those folks that are a little bit more resistant around the work that we're doing. So when people ask me how I entered into this D&I space, I simply think that I was born to do what I'm doing. I really think that it is my mission in life, and that I will always be connecting people to opportunities in some shape or form.
Wow. We really feel like you were born to do this work as well. And we love having you. Please, to our audience, stay connected and look out for the work of these two amazing women, Byna Elliott, JP Morgan Advancing Black Pathways, and Jill Littlejohn Bostick, diversity and inclusion work that she's doing at Hubble, our sponsor today. Thank you so very much. You two were completely amazing. Listen, on behalf of the National Urban League, we'd like to thank you, Wanda Jackson, Kristen Bray, myself, Kenneth L. Johnson. This has been an amazing conversation. Coming up next, it's going to be an unbelievable conversation. The Training Associates report that more than 80% of U.S. employers believe that workers age 50 and more are a valuable resource for training and mentoring, and an important source of institutional knowledge. During this webinar, learn the importance of developing a beginner's mindset to learn new skills and tools to thrive in the workplace amongst a diverse workforce. We're just keeping this diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation going. That's what we do at the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series. So stay tuned April 21st for Bridging the Gap. We hope to see you guys here at 12 noon on the 21st. Registration link and information to follow, of course. Listen, again, Byna Elliott, Jill Littlejohn Bostick, thank you so very much for joining us today. You guys were amazing.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. This has been great.
The audience, great questions. You guys were amazing as well. We'll see you on the 21st. Kenneth L. Johnson, the Urban League Jobs Network Digital Career Success Series.